Hey there, class. Happy June to you all. We're coming at you with our video of the day, which is going to be about essays. So, I gave you guys your essay assignment on Friday, but now it's time to talk about how to write an essay, right? And the best way to go about it. So, step one of creating an essay is the thesis. Do this first. So a thesis is your answer to the question and the main idea of your essay. Similar sort of to a topic sentence in a paragraph, the whole point of your essay, like it says there, is to prove it, right? That's what you are trying to prove. It's what you're trying to show and everything like that, right? Think of it this way. I should read your essay, and then after reading it, what I read after that should be what I think after that should be your thesis, right? So it's what you want the reader to think, it's what you want the reader to believe, or what you want the reader to know, and it should be clear, not too narrow and not too broad. Okay, so it needs to be right in the middle. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, let me do a demonstration. So my teacher question is going to be, what was Caro's real objective when she jumped into the water? Was this a result of her immaturity or was it something else? So that's the teacher only question. You guys don't get to do this question because I'm doing this question. So, like I said, we're going to make a thesis first. Now, the trick is with a good thesis is, again, as I said, it should be not too narrow and not too broad. So, if I were to make a thesis, little girls always want to have attention, right? Well, look at my question. It's about what was Caro's real objective, right? So if I just say little girls want to have attention, that's what we call a too broad thesis, right? It's so broad that it doesn't really even say anything, right? So this one's no good, right? Because it's too broad. Whereas if I say this, Carl was too young to be given marijuana by Neil, and that had a negative effect on her. That's what we call a too narrow thesis, right? Because it makes it sound like the whole thing happened just because Neil gave her some marijuana, right? Which I think is a bit of a stretch, right? So, those are the kinds of theses you want to avoid, right? You don't want your things to be too narrow or too broad. What you want instead is to have a thesis that is sort of going down the middle, right? It's not too broad, it's not too narrow. Let's see what I've got here. Caro hated the fact that her mother ripped her from her comfortable home in order to live with a vagrant like Neil, which led her to create progressively more dangerous stunts in order to get her mother to address her situation. So, this thesis is three things, right? First, it's got a clear position and answer to the question. It's not too vague, right? So it's not or too broad, I should say, right? As in, it's not trying to just narrow it down to a very, very, very loose understanding of the story, right? But it's also not too specific. It's not just saying, oh, it's about marijuana or it's about this or that, right? So that's the sort of in-between zone that you want to bring your thesis to, right? It has to have a clear position, answer the question, not too vague, not too specific. Okay, that's sort of the green zone. So this is what you should do first, right? So when you are answering my questions, whichever one of the five you pick to answer, right, don't just start writing an essay, right? The worst kinds of essays I get are the ones where the student just picks a question and then just starts sort of vomiting all over the paper, or in your case, typing, right? Just like, oh, okay, let's answer, right? And maybe it's not until paragraph 3 or page 3 or something like that where we actually get a thesis, right? So instead, what we need to do is think before you start to write the essay, right? Before you start writing essays, think about what your thesis is. Think about what you're going to say, right? And for that matter, it might be a good idea to do some planning. So, what I like to do when it comes to writing essays is I like to make sure I have a good outline, right? So that I know what I'm doing before I start to do it. So, Here you see what's called the skeleton essay outline structure, right? And I'm taking this from Ryerson University, by the way, so they use this over at Ryerson, right? And it's very useful. I mean, they use it everywhere. So what it is you put your topic and your thesis on the top, and then essentially you break down your essay into main ideas and supporting points, right? So it's going to be main idea number one, and then a supporting point, and maybe some details that go with it. Then main idea number two, main idea number three, main idea number four, right? Each of these main ideas are going to be a paragraph or two in your essay, right? So you're going to go into detail about each of these main ideas. You should know, by the way, that this is a 1,000-word essay, right? Which is roughly 4 pages, right? Give or take, right? 250 words in 12 font, double space times New Roman is going to be uh, about a page, right? So 1,000 will be 4 pages, right? So, by the way, if you need to know about what your word count is, you go to tools and you go to word count, and there it is, right? So, let me show you guys what this thing looks like once you've done it. So I've made an outline here, and by the way, I will post this for you guys to take a close look at, right? In case that's of interest to you. But here's my outline. So the question is there, what was Kara's real objective when she jumped into the water? Was this a result of her immaturity or was it something else? And then, of course, I'll even put thesis here. Thesis, Karo hated the fact that her mother had ripped her from her comfortable home in order to live with a vagrant like Neil, which led to her to create progressively more dangerous stunts in order to get her mother to address the situation. So, there's my thesis, right? And now I just break it down into my 3 main ideas, right, which I've got here. So I've got my first main idea. Caro hates the move to the trailer with a deep passion, right? Bullet point number 1, she constantly tells her siblings to remember the old house because she wants to keep those memories alive. Page 3. She worries for her dog. She constantly gets into fights with Neil, right? So I put all of my supporting points, right? And you guys can take a close look at this after, into bullet points. I'm not worried about spelling here. I'm not worried about grammar. I'm just putting ideas onto paper so that I know what I'm doing, right? That's the most important thing for writing an outline, is that you need to know what you're doing, right? You'll notice, by the way, that I'm putting some page numbers, right? Because when I write my essay, I might want to quote the paper, right? I might want to say something, to quote something from the actual essay story. I don't need to write the quote down or copy the quote down just in to my outline, but it's good for me to just say it's on page 3, so that when I'm writing this thing and I say, all right, here's where I use my quote, I can go and I can find it, right? So again, I've got 3 main ideas. Caro hates the move to the trailer with a deep passion. Caro was attempting to get her mother to go back to her father before the incident take place, right? And I have my evidence for that. And then finally, Caro jumping in the water is her attempt to prove to her mother that they don't belong there, right? So what I've done there is I've clearly grouped my ideas together, right? And all of my ideas, by the way, are supporting my thesis. So there are a lot of advantages to doing things like this, right? So if there's something that's wrong with your ideas, right? If something you say doesn't make sense, it's much, much better to catch it during your outline phase, rather than catching it, when you're almost done your essay, right? Having to rewrite a paragraph is a lot harder than having to rewrite a bullet point, right? So it's much better to just, rewrite a bullet point rather than an entire paragraph, right? And it also just gives you that structure and coherence that you really need in order to write an effective essay, right? So there's a lot of advantages to you guys doing it like this. So here's going to be step 1 of you putting together your essay. And one of you actually already did this, which was great. I think it would be great if you guys could put together one of these outlines and just toss it to me as an email. Or should I put it on the website? Nah, the website can be confusing. Let's just send it to an email. So email me your outline. You guys know my email, so I'll put it up anyway. But you guys, yeah, if you're this far in the class, I think you should know my email. But nevertheless, if you don't, there it is. Right? Send me one of these. Right? An outline with your thesis on top and your three main ideas in underneath with some, 3 or 4 bullet points about what you're going to say in those paragraphs. Right? These aren't too hard to put together, and it's too bad I have to do this online, because usually what I try to do with my students is I literally will do this in front of you and show that it can be done in 10 minutes. Maybe I should have done this all on video after all. But yeah, you can do these in about 10 minutes, believe it or not. Meow. I don't have any ideas, and I don't know what to write. What should I do? Well, if you don't have any ideas, like this cat here, then there are a couple of things you should do. First, think about which of the questions is most interesting to you, right? Think about, why, uh, are the things that you were most interested in the discussion that we had on Friday, or was it Thursday? Thursday. Think about which parts of the stories you found most interesting, and those are the parts of the story that you should write about, right? So that is what you should do if you're sort of out of ideas. What I tried to do with these questions is make them nice and broad, right? So, things like, the mother question, for instance. Uh, there are questions where you can talk not just about the story itself, but also about motherhood in general, right? Same thing with the one about Neil's philosophy about being happy or not being happy, right? You can talk not just about the story for that one, but also, life in general, or things you see in the media or whatnot. All right, so that is what I'm intending for this assignment to be. Is that something that hopefully anyone can write about, right? I know the Banquo question is very specific, but again, that one's for the Macbeth fans in particular. Anyhow, so that's I'm gonna leave it there for today. We'll talk about intro paragraphs and all of that good stuff tomorrow, right? So for now, if you guys could put together an outline like this, so that I could take a quick look, email it to this address, and I will give you guys some feedback on what's going on, right? And if you are out of ideas or don't know what's going on, feel free to send me an email about that either as well. All right, so thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you all tomorrow.